welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you. It's really exciting to have you on to chat about the changing operating models and the pandemic and customer service over the last year or two.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben. Yeah, there probably other more interesting topics, if I'm honest, but it's one that I'm familiar with and happy to talk about.
We should probably start at the beginning, but maybe you could give us like a kind of overview of like what you've seen change and before we dig into the detail, what's it been like for the last like 12 months for you?
Yeah, sure. So if I sort of just preface a little bit and say that a lot of the terminology I use to sort of describe the last 12 probably be in the form of before, during and after pandemic. And I appreciate that at a wider level, pandemic's still here. It's not technically after, but with signs on the horizon of the world opening back up, the vaccine program and those things. When I refer to after pandemic, it's more that we've probably found a way to adapt to our current situation, and we've found ways to continue, or in most cases have found ways to continue business and or running customer service. So when I talk about after pandemic, it's more around the stage that we're at now, not necessarily at a level of, people with and without COVID. So I guess the earliest memory will be somewhere around February, March last year. For us, that's the beginning of the financial year. And we have a budget set and we look at what the previous year was like in terms of sales, contact volumes, forecasting, and just try and figure out, do we have the right people, the right amount of people, and are we going to be able to service our customers for the upcoming year? In March/April, just changed it, flipped, turned upside down, and everything went out the window. All budgets, all plans, everything. And I guess I saw that not just happen in customer service, but across the whole organization. Immediately, everybody went into doing mode. How do we react to this quickly? How do we make sure that all our teams are safe? Because at that stage, there probably wasn't a lot of understanding around what we were dealing with, and the idea of lockdown and it being quite severe in that I would say a lot of people followed lockdown quite largely versus this current lockdown. If you look outside your window, you see many more cars on the road, and one would argue that this is probably more of a stricter lockdown than the first one. But I guess it's people's understanding, perhaps people's patience for yet another lockdown, perhaps lack of freedom. And so early on during first lockdown, what changed? What changed for us? And the biggest change for us, and the first time in our history, we closed our stores. And that for us was unprecedented. And actually now, during lockdown 3, many more stores have closed and have been asked to close, and perhaps some have not survived. So at the beginning of first lockdown, closing of stores, we saw quite a large shift to online. And so I wouldn't say that I saw any slowdown in terms of demand, whether that's sales demand and or contact demand. So customers trying to get through, having a query, whether it's pre-sale or post-sale, flowed.
Were you, I guess, like pre all of this, did you have a big team in-house, or were you like mainly like outsourcing it? Like what was the kind of makeup of how your team looked?
Within our operating model, so we work with partners, and within that partnership model, there's a toing and froing between forecasting. So forecasting within our business and then within the partner's business to make sure that we're aligned on headcount. Going back to what I said earlier, that the budget for the year will have been set prior to COVID-19 and will have been based on 2019's growth and will have been based on that view at that time. However, as COVID came in, the boom, if I can call it a boom, in online shopping, completely unprecedented, double-digit growth, and the end result of that meant that many double-digit uplift in contact also. None of it budgeted, forecasted, catered for. And so somewhere in the region as a range between 20 and 40% uplift in contact volume. So not only does that present you a challenge from a budget perspective, which arguably is probably the easier challenge, it's not too difficult. It's quite a clear business case. We're receiving 20% more contacts with customers. We need experience going, I need this much more funding, and then we'll deal with it. So that's quite easy. It's more difficult to then grow your headcount and get people in, and recruitment, training, the experience of a new starter coming on board, especially in the middle of a pandemic. A lot of that experience for that new starter being remote. So, imagine joining a company where you've never been to the company and it's all been through Zoom or Teams or whatever your choice of video conferencing is. So it's one thing to get budget, it's another thing to try and get the team on board. And then from a people perspective, as I say, during first lockdown, lots of challenge around not knowing, not understanding what COVID-19 was, trying to make sure that people were safe, people felt safe, and also around absence and isolation. And so against the backdrop of growth in contacts, needing more funding, needing more people versus absence versus reassurance is quite difficult, and trying to adapt early on during lockdown one. That was a big challenge, and I know from speaking to people in my network who do a similar role to I do in other businesses, they all came across the same problems. And a lot of us already working from home at a contact center level, we had to move to that model. Some will have already had that in place, but we didn't. So we looked to get a working from home model up and running quickly. And some of that was around reassurance for staff to answer the earlier problem there. For those who were isolating but perhaps were symptom free, so they wanted to continue some level of normalcy at home. They didn't just want to be locked away in a room, not doing anything. They wanted to try and create some level of normal life and continue to work. So providing them with that option, and then also just making sure from a security perspective, from a systems perspective, that we were able to make that work, and where possible, minimal disruption to customers. And so things like recording messaging on our phone lines to explain that there are delays and why, updating our website, having posts over social, just trying to broadcast and explain to customers, and these are challenges we're going through. We know you're trying to get through to us. We're here and we're going to help you. That's the first change, if you like, in operating model, that, we blended in a work from home solution in record time, typically a number of months to get something like that up and running. But during the pandemic, everything went down to weeks or days, just so that we could get traction and deliver things.
A lot of people, especially in the kind of retail industries, talk about like the acceleration of certain things. And it does sound like that. It's like the acceleration of trends from like things like working from home, but also like you had to respond really quickly. But then also the acceleration to, I don't know what your kind of balance of revenue was compared to like store versus e-commerce, but like obviously everyone just flipped to e-commerce. Yeah. And I think I've heard other companies like Brewdog recently announced that like they lost 90% of revenue overnight and then have now 10% more than they ever were.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing flip, but it seems to have really done well on that e-commerce channel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the same thing that you've described there. And interestingly, all of the bits around the e-commerce channel, so thinking about and couriers, partnerships, lots of things in the news about certain carrier businesses struggling to keep up with that demand. Mm-hmm. So human growth in online grocery shopping, that's a market that's taken on double, triple digit growth in some areas. And so in every way possible, one of the things that, often hear about people talking about is being adaptable, being agile, and being able to respond to things. It never ceases to amaze me how people are able to find a way to make something happen if they want to do it. And sometimes the conditions are right for that. So, if I walked in to the boardroom and just asked for more money to do some things, and I wanted that money in a number of days or weeks to deliver something, I'd probably be told not to come back to the boardroom. But the timing, the environment, what was going on at the time meant that I was able to do just that, walk straight into the boardroom and say, hey, we need to do something. And by proposing immediate sign off and then immediate delivery. So
the time of opportunity.
Absolutely. And it was an opportunity to, I call it test and learn. I'm sure there's a more appropriate term for it. An opportunity to test and learn and do it in shorter cycles so that you can just keep tweaking and adapting so that you can continue to run your business and provide a service, because the demand is there. The demand has continued. It hasn't stopped. It's still there today. And I can't see the future, but all intents and purposes, and many more smarter economists than myself are predicting that online will continue. That's not going to slow down anytime soon. And then there's even some economists talking about how reopening from a space is also going to see some level of boom and spending in this year. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how we may then again need to look at our operating model within customer service to adapt to that.
What do you think, I mean, over the pandemic, in your experience and into the future, like how do channels that customers want to contact you on change?
It's interesting. So I've been in customer service coming out to about 20 years now. And in that time, phone has always been king. And I've worked across a number of different businesses, and it's always the largest proportion of contact volume or contact share. I guess for the first time in those 20 years, during pandemic, I saw phone take a backseat. And in particular, I saw the growth of things like email and social far outweigh phone. And I would say even today, now fast forward sort of 12 months from the first point of COVID, email is still up there and social is still up there in terms of its growth and share of contacts. So typically emails are harder to deal with from a customer service perspective. They take longer. It's at least 2 emails minimum to solve a problem and get a customer a fast resolution. And so things like chat or social and or phone typically are faster. They're quicker. It's usually a session-based or a phone call. And so within that, you can get to a resolution and go backwards and forwards with your customer and resolve it. Whereas with an email, depending what time it comes in, what time I reply, and then what time the follow-up comes back, you can spread over 1 day, 2 days, many days. So typically, you'd almost say that's also more expensive to deal on email, doesn't always resolve the first or second time, or in a short period of time. And so how do you then work with that? That also has an onwards impact to all of your costs and all of your budget. Because when you put your budget together for customer service, part of what you're doing is when you're predicting how many contacts you'll receive is how long those contacts will take. And if an email typically takes longer and there's more of them, that wouldn't have been in the budget because the budget for 2020 was built on 2019.
Yeah.
So there's a bit there around not only do we need to adapt our operating model, but we need to find out how to service customers who are channel hopping, introduce new channels if they're required. So for us, we actually launched live chat in 2020 with a couple of pilots in the past, but in 2020 we launched on fully live. And so it was looking at how can we provide more options for customers to get them faster resolution, and also perhaps find a way to drive email down, looking at things like automation for repetitive queries, whether that's, when is your store going to reopen? Do you stock this product? Where is my delivery? Those typical online-based queries that you would get, some of those can be automated and can be responded to swiftly, and others does require for somebody to put their eyes on it and really look at what's going on before responding.
You mentioned there about automation. Is there other stuff that you've seen now, like it's really important to have this type of technology in your kind of tech stack for customer service?
Yeah, I think there's always a bit around what is that contact around, why are customers getting in touch with you, and what are the movers and shakers, what are the trending items. 99% of e-commerce online businesses, in their top 5, they're going to get delivery queries, return queries, stock queries, website queries, and then just anything else. If you've then got, let's say, a payment issue takes place, by volume, it's probably not in your top 4 or 5. But if you compare it to how many you had the week prior or the month prior, it's grown by a couple of 100%. So how do you spot those trending issues that could eventually find their way into your top 5? And it's a pain point for a customer. So how can you get your hands and eyes and ears and everything onto those trending issues that you can then feed back into the business? Typically, that's what a customer service team would do. You collect your data and use it to inform your business, find the right teams and departments to help you solve those problems. So I would say good insight, not just a dashboard that tells you what your top 5 queries were that day, but that next level of detail down. How can you get the insight to what's happening so that you can also reassure yourself, but reassure your business and know what customers want?
We've just actually written like a sort of ebook on this subject about how do you get the rest of the business to listen to the customer service insights. Like customer service knows that they know the problems, they're like the front line of what the customer is facing, and that the rest of the business could be continually improving by listening. What systems would you suggest to get into place, I guess, to help the rest of the business start to listen to your insight? And
yeah, I mean, it's almost less about the system. I mean this in the right way, right? A lot of systems will produce either a report, a dashboard, or some form of Excel with some data. The step for me is, how do you present that back into the business? So is it via graphs, pivot tables, using numbers to get the point across? You have to know your audience. You have to know who it is that you're trying to influence and get their attention. So typically I find sort of the 2 or 3 ways over a number of years doing this being, so a report with numbers, option 1, or let's say A, and then B would be the customer story. So talking through a customer journey and bringing to life that X number of customers experience this journey. It's not what we would want them to experience. It's not in the brand, and actually it's just not right. It's not the best experience. So how can we improve that? So can you use a customer story to bring it to life? Do you use data to bring it to life? And then option C, or the third one, which currently is slightly more difficult to do, but it is around having a revolving door into your contact center. So having, whether it's certain departments or execs, visiting your contact center, spending a day listening to calls. It's the single fastest way I've ever seen to get somebody's attention. Get them to listen to 4 or 5 phone calls from a customer, and they'll immediately, the impact of that versus me turning up with a report or a customer story, it's night and day difference. So, I've worked in some organizations where, regardless of the role that you do within the organization, as part of your induction, you'll spend a day in the contact center. You will spend a day listening to customers. You may receive training and respond to a few emails, just so that you understand what customers are talking about, what they're going through, and how, when you then take that knowledge back into your own role, whether that's in marketing, trading, in IT, anywhere else, you will have had an experience of that customer. So I've seen those in induction programs, which I value highly, and I think everyone at some point should speak to a customer and or listen to a customer. And then when it's to do with, say, department heads or execs, making sure that you've got diary time that they are visiting, whether that's once a year, twice a year, and just keeping finger on the pulse and keeping customer service and contact center front of mind for them, like you said, so that it's always there, they always think about it. And you get to a point, I find, that people start to approach you. They come back to you and say, hey, it's been a while since I last visited. I definitely want to come again. I really enjoyed my last visit. Can you book me in? And so it's creating that sort of revolving door within customer service. I'm almost finished on this point. Typically, customer service as a department, usually it's either based in the same building as head office with everybody else. Sometimes it's connected to distribution center, DC, and occasionally it's all by itself in its own building, far away from head office. And so all of those present different challenges. If you're in the same building as head office, it's quite easy for somebody from marketing, IT, or elsewhere to walk straight into the contact center and say, hey, we've just launched this feature. Have you heard any noise about it? Versus this voucher code problem. How many calls have you had about it? Or if the contact center is on the other side of town or in a whole other country, then you just need to use other tools to get that information. So there's a bit around proximity of contact center, which also has an impact.
Yeah, all of those points were really great, I think. And I've heard all versions of that before, especially I talked to someone like the customer service head at Pret, and they get everyone to go through the onboarding, work in the shop for a week first, kind of thing.
Amazing.
That's frontline, kind of connect you to the customers as well.
A couple of dodgy sandwiches every time there's a new startup.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Pret sandwiches, by the way. That was a joke. Don't be offended.
Me too, actually. And on the last thing you said, we talked to someone who they were in a startup that had sort of just started growing quite quickly, and they'd gone from being able to sort of turn around to the product team and say that complaining about this, to being able to is not really being able to do that anymore, and having that same proximity issue. We sort of talked about channels changing, tech stack changing, insight. Was there any changes in the sort of makeup of who you need to hire now? What type of person? Is there a difference in I guess, profile that you look for?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, absolutely. I think that as a challenge probably existed pre-pandemic in so much as the types of contact your contact center receives. Is it product-based? Is it stock-based? Is it pre-delivery, post-delivery? Are people trying to get in touch with you and get information from you before transacting with you? Or is that not a problem? Information you find on your site, the product speaks for itself. It's easy to purchase. But now people are contacting you because there's a delivery query, a returns query, exchange. So the types of contact your contact center receives probably drive some of the profile that you're going after when you're recruiting. And I guess there's probably a few different profiles, but the two most prominent ones are product-based. So a team that understands the products that your business sells. So, is it a fashion business? Is it a subscription business? Is it product based? And the people that you hire, do you go for people who have that background and perhaps teach them customer service? Or do you go after that slightly more technical customer service problem solving skill set, which doesn't quite have product knowledge as a skill, but is able to come along and at a generalist level, break down a query and then know where to go and look for an answer? I would say the balance is probably both, where you could try and get product knowledge and technical customer service knowledge so that you have a diverse workforce and that you're able to then, serve your customers. We don't live in a world of clones. That's never going to happen. So there's a bit around how do you get a diverse workforce that can handle many different types of queries for all of your customers. I do believe that with, the market being as tough as it is, with competition, with some businesses not making it through, that of the other businesses that are left behind, the ones that are going to pick up market share, it's probably going to be by having good product knowledge, being able to talk to a customer on that level, provide them reassurance, provide them information, help them get over that final hurdle to making that purchase. That's probably going to be the difference here in the type of candidate to go after.
Interesting. There's a question of, should you have sales training for those kind of people as well? What do you think about that? Do you think it's about just being helpful? Do you think there's some kind of upselling opportunities in there?
But I guess it kind of depends on your brand. So for some brands, sales is not the driver. That's not the KPI. That's not what people are measuring. And it just happens to be a consequence of great service. The way that your brand positions itself and markets itself, perhaps it is able to sell products without the help of a customer service team. And then as a team, you're just there to help. There are also those brands that rely on sales to come through the customer service channel. And that could be those customers who are close to making a purchase, but for a reason haven't crossed over that final line. And customer service can sometimes be the difference. And so the KPI there for customer service would be around retention and acquisition. How much does customer service contribute to those key performance indicators by having that sort of sales training? And then you, of course, have that scale of how much you upsell naturally versus whether your goal is all around trying to upsell. So if the advisors have a key performance indicator around sales, naturally their behavior is going to be incentivized to push for that within the contact. And so some brands, it happens, and other brands don't want that to happen. And so it's hard for me to pinpoint it, but I would say towards the upper end of the market, when I say upper, I'm to use the word luxury as an example, then perhaps there's less of a push to do sales, and it's more around providing a great experience, which may or may not lead to a sale.
Yeah. I imagine either way, if it's not subtle, you're going to annoy your customers pretty quick.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, many years ago, when I used to work in the bank and in the call center for banking, and this is pre-iPhone, so these were the days when you'd call you to find out how much you have in your account. Nobody does that now. It's when you can find out immediately how much money you have or don't have. So in those days, picking up the phone and taking a call, one of our quality measures, we had to ensure in every call at the end, we would say to the customer, is there anything else I can help you with? And can I get you into a branch for a financial review? And as an advisor, if you're targeted to book a number of financial reviews per week, per month, whatever the sort of cycle is, you'll ask every customer. You'll play the numbers game. And it might be that your customer starts the call by saying, I'm in a rush, can you just tell me my balance? And then you tell them the balance and you're like, by the way, before you go, even though you've just told me you're in a rush, can I get you in for a financial review? And then it's not uncommon at the time for somebody to come back to me and say, I've got £100 in my account. Do you really think I need a financial review right now? And so I think there's a slight disconnect between, annoying a customer versus setting a KPI that might drive certain behavior. It's a very difficult balance.
Yeah, because you need to make sure the KPIs are aligned with customer experience there. It seems like the equivalent to me of every time I go to the supermarket and they ask me to sign up to their loyalty card or something. Yeah. And they don't even ask it sincerely, really. It's just like, do you want a cut? No. Okay.
Well, that's the thing. Another example that used to be a store card, right? Yeah. And typically having a store credit card with a higher APR attached to it. The sales pitch always was, do you want 10% off your purchase today? Just sign up to this at this exorbitant rate. I've not seen that more recently, I have to say, but I remember almost every time going out and shopping that used to happen. By the way, that doesn't happen to you online, right? So when you're online, that's not there now. You don't have somebody. There might be something on the screen, but there's nobody stopping you in mid-flow saying, "Hey, can I get you to sign up to this store card or this loyalty?"
What do you think about? This is like a slightly different topic, but about I think agent progression in general. Like I've heard like kind of mixed things about what should be the future of customer service agent. Like, do they go up? Do a lot of them might leave or go to a different profession? Do you think there should be ways to progress within the company outside of customer service?
I think fulfillment / purpose / reasons for being, right, is different for everybody. Typically, my experience within the contact center industry is that it has a life cycle to it. It's a few years at most, between sort of 1 to 2 years. And it's usually a place where somebody passes through, gains some experience to open a different door. And within some organizations, that could be internal into another team or department. And in some cases, maybe you move on from there and you end up doing something else. And your end or your career is not in the same industry that you worked in the call center for. So there's a bit around, the rise of call centers as a place to work. Linking it to the pandemic slightly, we probably saw more people heading towards call centers and contact centers, especially from the retail industry when lots of stores closed down with lots of lockdowns. If people weren't part of the furlough scheme, then, they ended up unemployed. The way that the online industry grew, so did contact centers. And so many more people for the first time heading into a contact center as a means to employment, and not necessarily back to the first point I made around people passing through a contact center for 1 or 2 years in career or journey. There are those, of course, who get to contact center and stay. So I've been in contact center coming up 20 years now, and I'm not alone in that. There are many people who can progress. I think it's just trying to find out people's purpose, what they want and need. For some people, they're happy in role. And so how do you continue to make sure they stay happy and they have the right remuneration around that? And for those that are looking for a slightly different challenge or have a slightly different skill set and want to explore that, how can you provide breadth? Contact centers in the old days would usually involve a couple of advisors with a team leader. Now there's different roles out there around workforce planning, training as a whole, now within contact center as well, reporting, analytics, the operational side, the project side. So contact centers have also grown, and the breadth of roles has widened and grown also, providing many more career opportunities for people.
Yeah, which would make sense, I guess, to see the change in people staying for longer and seeing it as a career rather than... Yeah, that's interesting. Did it change the way that employee churn worked for you, like over the pandemic? Did you see less people leaving or anything different? Yeah,
I think I probably would say that I'm not sure it changed so much throughout the pandemic. Of the many different contact centers I've worked, whether they were in-house, outsourced partnership model, or a bit of both, churn, I think, applies for different reasons, whether that's people being happy at work or the industry that you're in or the location that you're in. So if I take the example where if your contact center is based in a university town and you end up with a high proportion of university students joining your contact center, well, most university students are going to graduate and move on. And so you've got a natural churn there that's always going to be there, and you plan for it. But then there are other slightly more higher pressured industries, like let's say sales as an example, example, that'll be much more high pressure than a service environment. Churn is likely to be higher there. So how do you provide the right environment so that you can minimize churn where possible, and then have a plan in place to work towards replacing your churn to whatever that cycle is? Of course, there's money to be saved in recruitment if you can reduce your churn. And then there's also just having happier employees around and motivated employees around, providing better customer experience. So it's a good measure, but I think some of it's driven by industry, location, and the KPIs that you have.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely like to see like more and more people considering just like customer service to be like their long-term career, and that there's opportunity to grow significantly within that. That'd be a cool change that seems to be happening slowly.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking into, there's an article that I read, and it just made me think a little bit differently around how a workforce could work. And by the way, I haven't fully developed this thinking yet, but at a base level, idea that customer service could be a skill of mine that I could deliver for a number of businesses to their customers. So let's say I'm an online e-commerce specialist. I understand delivery queries, return queries, how that works. Let's say I'm self-employed and I offer my services to a number of brands, and they hire me at my rate, at the hours that I want to work that suit me. I'm able to stay in the industry. I'm able to share my experience across different businesses and customers. And I'm also able to live my life that suits me. So I try not to liken it this way, but just thinking about sort of that Deliveroo, that kind of model where as a driver, as a rider, you could potentially work for a few different... Yeah, something like that occur within customer service that gives you more flexibility. One of the challenges in customer service, and you'll be familiar with this, is around shift work. And for some people, shifts work great. And for other people, it can be disruptive to home life, to well-being, those kind of things.
Yeah, so I guess it would be really hard to optimize, but it would work like if you had like a ton of people who could just switch on when they were willing to for a couple of hours. And I guess now we've moved to working from home, that could become more and more.
Yeah, I suspect it does already exist. I'm sure some industries will work that way, where people have regular training throughout the year, and perhaps they're on a retainer of some sorts and they are activated when required. But just sort of thinking through more around what you were saying around that sort of gig economy and understanding whether there's anything in that.
There's a lot of spikes, isn't there, as well, in customer service, where you have like the Christmas rush, or you just have like a period of time where you need more people. So it would work to fulfill those gaps in a way.
Yeah. It's incredibly difficult to predict all the peaks and all the troughs. The troughs are slightly easier to deal with, in so much as you may have people around and maybe they can spend more time training and doing e-learning or being busy with something. That's quite easy to do. But if the person's not already there and then you've got a peak of calls, that is the harder one to solve. So how can you look at, your channel mix? Could you get yourself to channels that are not so live by their nature, which I know contradicts what I said earlier about driving emails down, but emails give you the ability to not have to answer them immediately, but perhaps spread out your workload a little bit. But for those peaks, how can you, if there's a spike in calls, shift resource to calls temporarily to get that spike and then move back to a different channel afterwards? So it isn't a struggle. There's a whole industry around it, workforce planning. And as I say, when I first started in contact center land, that wasn't a thing. The team leader did every role and wore every hat. But now you have specialists who come in, they have algorithms, they have financial models, planning models, and it's almost scary how close they are in telling you how many calls you'll get in which hour on what day. It's impressive.
I wanted to ask you more about the future of like what's next. Are things going to change back? Are you predicting that, or are you going to continue a lot of the stuff that you managed to get through?
Yeah, I think it'd be a wasted opportunity if we didn't continue in the way that we started throughout 2020. Back to test and learn model, being able to quickly test them, learn from them, and adapt from them. So I think the future should be more of that. We shouldn't stop. We should look at the successes of what we achieved by being so nimble throughout 2020. If we apply that in growth years, then we should be able to ride those growth curves. And I think in terms of the future, I'd like to see more around that product knowledge piece become something. And again, it's not fully developed. I haven't thought it through, but let's say I have a passion for trainers and I'm a specialist in trainers. Could I be connected to a platform where whoever the customer is from whichever business they approach, I'm the service person for that. So that customer comes through to me and I help them get the right pair of trainers. I'm incentivized to do that. I paid for that, but then that business gains that sale. But what that customer gains is the best possible experience because they're speaking to a specialist in that category. I've not thought through all of the of how that would work, but I think there is a future around product knowledge and how to connect that to the right customer at the right time.
I think it's definitely possible to have like the routing piece in like knowing the tickets are about trainers and putting it to the trainer team, then going that one step further to having a trainer specialist in the industry talk to you. That'd be really cool, I think. Thank you very much. It's been really great. I've learned a lot. I think we got into a lot of detail, which is great.
Yeah, so for those people that don't find it very interesting, you may use it as a how to get to sleep podcast. Just put it in plain, fall asleep to it, that did find it interesting. And if you work at a business like the one that I do and you do the type of role that I do and you want to have a one-to-one conversation with me and share stories, please do. And if you work in sales and business development, please don't contact me. Kidding, but I'm not kidding.
Cool. Thank you very much.